Yo, yo, peace and blessings.
Peace.
Peace and blessings.
Peace. What up, world? We back at it again. Episode number 8. Consistently hitting y'all with the information, with the interaction, centered on land ownership. Today, we're gonna kind of hybridize, if that's a word, our discussion today. So it's gonna be always centered on land ownership, but we're also gonna be talking about firearms, which is an essential part of land ownership in terms of like preservation, right? Obviously, we've talked about how important it is to preserve what you've acquired, and firearms is an essential piece of that. But before we jump into that, we got to go back to what we always do to break the ice on these sessions. Who spit those bars? I got a pretty good one today. I think one of y'all's gonna catch on to this one. So I'm gonna try to disguise this as best as I can and break up the cadence of it. All right. So
David Banner.
Outcast Liberation.
Nah, no doubt. Nah. All right. So this one is all right. It starts like this. Envisioning ownership. Yo, it can happen. What do we own? Not enough land, not enough homes, not enough banks.
Nice.
I knew you was on it, bro. I know you was on it. I knew you was on it because we talked about this song. All right, so let me run it back, and then I'm gonna do the whole part that I was gonna do. Right, envisioning ownership. Yo, it can happen. What do we own? Not enough land, not enough homes, not enough banks to give my brother a loan. What do we own? The skin on our backs. We rent and we ask for reparation. Then they hit us with tax and insurance if we live to be old. What about now? So stop being controlled. We black zombies.
Black zombies.
Black Zombies is the track. That's off Lost Tapes when Nas was in his bag. That's like my favorite period. As a Nas fan, like Stillmatic into the Lost Tapes. That was like elite Nas to me. I mean, he's still elite, but that's like my favorite little period.
I agree.
As a Nas fan, so that's a good one. Black Zombie. That whole track from start to finish is pretty. It's pretty heavy. A lot of bars.
Run it back one more time. Run it back one more time.
All right. All right. Let me.
I never heard it.
Black Zombie. You gotta check that one out, bro.
I never heard the so I heard like good things and bad things about it, but I never really listened to it for myself.
Okay. Envisioning ownership. Yo, it can happen. What do we own? Not enough land, not enough homes, not enough banks to give my brother a loan. What do we own? The skin on our backs. We rent. We ask for reparations. Then they hit us with tax and insurance if we later be owed. What about now? So stop being controlled. We black zombies.
Yeah, that's kind of deep.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one where he called himself a Columbia record slave, right?
So get paid.
Get paid, yeah.
Yeah, that's the joint right there.
Yeah.
That's a good one, man. So if you ain't checked that track out, man, I highly suggest that one. Now it's got a lot of songs like that, to be honest. But yeah, the Lost Tapes is like one of my favorite projects that he put out for sure. So that's featured on there. All right, so moving forward, before we get
that video,
yeah, go ahead and drop that video.
Yeah, it's about the brothers, the family, the people that got the homestead, and they're one thing that you want to do for sure once you get settled in, or even if you plan on being out there, frequently, is registering your property with to be on the what is it, to be on the 911 list?
So basically you're registering for a 911 address.
911 address, right.
So that they have you in the database.
Right. So it's just a quick 2-3 minute video on how these people did it and how they went about it, and the kind of like the steps that they went through to do that. We could watch it real quick.
How you doing? All right. They told you what we got going on out here?
We are on our way to the sheriff department to get our 911 address. Is that what they're calling it? Also new to everybody in the car.
About to make us total transition from normal. Well, I guess what normalcy is. We're gonna re-script normalcy and come up with a more self-sufficient, pleasing lifestyle. So we are in the sheriff's office. I don't want to tell you exactly what it is, not safety. And we are getting our address, and then this is the process so we get the mailbox and things like that. But here's Miss Christina. I'm doing well. How about yourself? You mind if I? No, you're good. Okay, hello. She's gonna help us, and we're getting the whole process. We're gonna get our homestead in the mailbox. But then I don't know anything about this. I'm learning as I go, so y'all bear with me, okay? All right, see you soon.
Hey, okay, so let me
Okay.
see what you got here. Yeah, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. Here, I don't have my anymore cards.
I'm handing that to you. Okay, cool. Appreciate it, man.
Since you have an address, it's hard to start a paper trail without.
That's what. Okay.
So at some point, somebody will trespass on the
Well,
property.
we just want to make sure. I didn't want to pull up to the property
Right.
and start walking around and they be like, who the hell is that over there? And
Right.
have an issue.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go through you guys first and make sure start a paper trail.
Right.
I'm the owner of the property. I have a right to be over here. So that's what I wanted to establish more than anything.
Okay. Do you know what the address is going to be yet?
I do not. That's the process of what she's doing right there. And when that's kind of like what we're trying to essentially get taken care of.
Gotcha. I'm gonna let you a little rundown of that.
No problem. Doing all right today, man?
Yes, sir. How about you?
Man, I'm not gonna do no complaining, man. I'm excited about this here, man.
Y'all about to build on here?
Do a little homestead, man. Do some microgreens.
Where y'all from?
We from Atlanta.
How'd you find out about little old Jones County?
Man, what's it? You never played football before?
No.
You for real? You never played football before?
No. I'm not the girl that runs.
She's not the girl that runs. She runs. I bet you like football players, though, didn't you?
I married one.
See how she make me feel like, man, I ain't no football player. But see how she boosts me up. All right, get yourself one.
Oh, y'all, what y'all think about that?
Yeah, I think that was dope, man. That was a nice little exchange of black love. But in addition to what they have, what they're showing, it's I think it was very put together, very, very intelligently. Is also like the way he went about it is usually not the route that's predicted, so to speak. You know what I mean? And I think that was a good idea for him to take that route and kind of just be a little proactive on what's ahead of him and try to get in front of those things. That's a good video for those who are interested in taking in doing that process. That's good info, especially when you look like us. You feel me? That's somewhat of the approach we need to be taking, because you don't always have to show your hand. You know what I mean? That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed, I agree with that. And in regard to what he was actually getting accomplished, that's essential. Considering, like, if you're in a rural area way out, or if it's just a newly developed plot, more likely than not, you don't have a 911 address already assigned. So that's something that you definitely want to set up in the event that you have an emergency of some sort. Law enforcement or paramedics, they have a reference of where to actually go versus the legal description, which is a lot harder to kind of navigate to. So that 911 address just simplifies your location for them. So it's definitely something that you would want to do for sure, and verify that you have one set up. And if not, it's a pretty simple process. And I think the counties and they can kind of walk you through that. It should be a similar process for every county for the most part. Indeed. So that's a
Is it
good video.
mandatory?
It's not mandatory to my knowledge. No, I don't believe it's mandatory. No, I could be wrong on that, but I don't think it's mandatory.
It's just good to have, though, just in case. I think it was good to be, like you said, proactive. Because shit, look what happened to us, man. We went out there. They, you know what I mean. They super perplexed. You know what I'm saying? And like he made a good point as well. Like I don't want to be trespassing and somebody say I'm trespassing and call the boys on me. Call the boys on us, or even
Right.
even worse, they could straight start popping at you. Because it is private property. You feel me? It's private property. So I think it was a good, knowledgeable video for a lot of people who's getting into homesteading, getting into land ownership, just to know that it might be a good idea to, to follow those steps as well.
Indeed. Indeed. Brother
You on
True,
mute,
you on
True.
mute. You on mute.
Sorry about that. I'm just curious, Colin, how did you, because that's something I wasn't aware of that would need to be done, would be a good idea to do when you have your own land. So how did you get hip to that?
So when let's say if you're building a structure, so I will say this, if you're building a structure and if you want that structure insured, for instance, then you're going to be required to get a building permit, right? Which essentially means that jurisdiction is going to have to come and perform inspections on whatever you're doing, right?
Okay.
One of their requirements is that you do have a 911 address. So they kind of tie that into the building permit process. So in my experience, the county that I'm building a structure in, it's literally just a form application that you got to fill out. And you just put all your information, you put like your legal description or GPS coordinates, whatever you have, and then they assign you an address. And I mean, I'd say within 5 to 7 business days, they will issue that address via letter and email, and it'll just say, "Hey, this is your official address." Right?
Is it a
So
street or is it like
yeah, it's a street. So in most instances, all those dirt roads that we would be navigating to get to these different properties way out, those are actually streets in a lot of instances, right? So they use those as a reference to assign your address.
Okay. So we still need to do that.
Yeah, that's something that we would want to do for sure.
And what he did was basically after he registered, he just tested it out and called 911, and that's when the cops showed up. Is that what was going on?
Yeah, so after that is issued, I believe they submit that to Google and everything. So eventually it'll pop up in those databases as well. But once it is issued, it should be cataloged so that 911 would be able to navigate to your property.
Okay.
Yeah. So by the time you get that letter and that verifies what that address is, you should be good to go. So if you had any kind of emergency or, once you call and you say, "Hey, this is where I'm at," they should be able to get to you. Otherwise, without that, you would have to give them the legal description, which I don't know if you all recall looking at that, but it's pretty elaborate as far as the location. Like you wouldn't want to ramble that off to, anyone to try to get them to where you are because it's going to be difficult to find. GPS coordinates are, I mean, that's perhaps the most precise thing that you could provide. But even that, without a
in an
GPS,
emergency, yeah, it's
yeah,
going.
Right.
that's not, yeah, it's not
Yeah, I mean,
reasonable to do that.
100,000 is 68.25. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
you're gonna be like, what?
right.
Yeah.
Yes,
So yeah.
indeed. Yes, indeed. So, considering our topic tonight, I definitely wanted to uh take a peek into history and spotlight this particular movement or group, the Deacons of Defense. Considering that we're discussing firearms, for those of you that may not be familiar with them, I'm just going to read off a quick summary of what that is and um, what that was about, essentially. So the Deacons for Defense and Justice was founded in 1964 in Jonesboro, Louisiana, to protect civil rights activists from the Ku Klux Klan, essentially. So the organization was made up of Black veterans from World War II, primarily, and they believed in, armed self-defense. 20 chapters were created throughout the South. So Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, most prevalently. Um, and they protected people when people were marching and protesting, in all those different instances that we know about during that period. The Deacons of Defense would basically show up and hold people down to give people that assurance that they would be safe. So it was definitely a grassroots movement. And not only was it just, people that showed up to show a presence, but these were trained individuals. As I previously stated, a lot of these guys were war veterans, so they were proficient in firearms. So shout out to them. There's a really great movie, and I don't know the exact title of the movie. It may be Deacons for Defense, but Forrest Whitaker is in it, I believe. And I can't recall when that movie was made or when it came out, but I saw it a couple of years ago, and it's a pretty good flick, and it gives a really good depiction of what that was all about. So I definitely recommend checking that out as well.
Yeah, came out in 03.
Okay, that sounds about right. That sounds
Mhm.
about right. That sounds about right. Um, so yeah, we have a very complex history in this country when it comes to obviously our freedoms and our rights and firearms. Um, a lot of legislation gets shifted rather quickly um, in regard to Black people embracing firearms. That seems to get immediate attention and immediate action, right? We know of a lot of instances, the Black Panthers and so on and so on. One thing that I think is worthy of discussing is what does the firearm mean to like the American, right? And I think that's a nuanced discussion, right? Because if you ask a white American, that's a symbol of, freedom, and obviously the Second Amendment is championed, and there's a lot of pride and entitlement associated with that. But in regard to Black Americans, I think it's a lot more complex of a
Yeah.
conversation. And I found an article on NPR that was published a couple of years ago, and it kind of gives some perspective into like the origin of firearms, not only here in America but in Africa, right? So I did want to read this real quick just to provide some historical context of what we're talking about, right? So, in regard to the introduction of the firearm into Africa, it actually influenced the slave trade. So, in Europe, essentially, we know there were like a series of wars, right? Um, and basically, a lot of firearms technology was kind of developed during these times, and obviously gunpowder essentially was innovated by the Chinese, right? But once Europe got a hold of it, they just kind of continued to develop the firearm, right?
Hmm.
So for the most part during the 16th and 17th century, firearms was, I mean, for the most part, it was only present there, right, in Europe, amongst all this turmoil, considering all the conflicts that were going on. And the main two reasons were why it was only there is because at the time, the Catholic Church prohibited the sale of firearms to non-Catholics, right? So,
Mm.
as we know, the Catholic Church was responsible for a lot of the regulation and just the standards of living at that time, right? The second reason is because there was a technological barrier, right? So, firearms at that time, they didn't operate well in tropical climates. And the ignition systems of these firearms at that time, they just weren't reliable, right? So that all kind of changed during the Protestant Reformation, right? So the Protestant slavers, when they went into Africa, they brought in a new and improved firearm, which is known as the flintlock musket. So essentially, this new and improved firearm was able to function a lot better in tropical climates. It was cheaper and it was just more reliable and easier to use, right? And in turn, this kind of became a currency which these slavers used to purchase slaves. Um, and that really kind of got the first leg of the triangle slave trade up and running. Um, so you can kind of see a direct correlation between the increase in gunpowder imports into Africa and the increase in slave exports leaving the continent at that time. So I thought that was pretty interesting, just to kind of take a glance into that, to look at, you know, just take a peek back into our ancestry, and just highlight that. And obviously, fast forward into now, because of our complex history on this soil, I don't think we have a uniform or a collective like sentiment on firearms. Some people still don't embrace, or I feel like most of us aren't as enthusiastic about it as we could be or should be. That's debatable. Perhaps a philosophical question, but just considering that piece, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's enlightening. I mean, they led us to believe that it was all spear chunking and blowing. When the motherfucker roll up on you, will hit you with the blow dart, and not realizing that we pretty much were the first to do a lot of the historical things in history. That being the firearm as well. I think that it's one thing that, as far as America, or even just not just here in America, but worldwide, and for a better lack of terms, a lot of them are intimidated by a nigga with a gun. And that's more scarier to them than anything, in my opinion. But I think it was definitely enlightening.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, definitely enlightening. Um, I just to kind of circle back around to where you were kind of finishing off at, I do think that it's important for us to like get familiar with gun safety. I think that gun safety, just the knowledge of how to use a weapon, creates the type of energy that should be carried on. I think a lot of the problem with guns is that people misuse them. You feel me? So I think starting with like gun safety in our communities would be a very important thing for people to understand before we even start going into like uh, marksman training and different things like that. I think, of course, we should start with gun safety at the beginning, like early ages in our communities, and then that way, when they grow into these older ages, teenage age or early young adults, that they're not misusing weapons because they already have a good understanding of the safety that goes behind it.
Good point.
Yeah, man. I'll just follow up that, piggybacking off of what Bilal was talking about, man. Just understanding the responsibility that comes with, firearms, at the earliest age possible. You understand what I'm saying? Because that's what we're going to be utilizing the most for protection. You know what I'm saying? So of course you got this whole stigma or stereotype, whatever you want to call it, of black people with a gun, because they understand that we can protect ourselves with that. But it's like when you see somebody coming with a gun, when you see somebody coming with a gun, approaching with the gun, you already know what time it is. Most likely they're coming to kill. And I just got out of a class where we were talking about this, Kylan, and you know what I'm saying? It's like when you sleep in the bed with your wife and somebody breaks into your home at 3 o'clock in the morning, most likely they're trying to do something. And they may have a firearm. So I think it's important for us to take, be more serious when it comes to that and everything. And just and with current events that just happened at the Kansas City parade, they utilize these type of incidents to try to a lot of people are fearful that they're going to take our gun rights away from us. So I encourage people to stockpile and because the more guns, pretty much the more power you have, you got more choices to choose from. And, if one breaks, you have other options if one gets too rusty or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So, stockpile on them joints, man, because best believe, it's like Dead Prez said, if the Air Force and Marine got gas, then we going to hold heat. You know what I'm saying? We got to be able to protect ourselves,
Yeah,
So,
that's what I was intending to say, is that once you learn gun safety, then you understand the power of a gun. You feel me? And then from there, it makes it harder to misuse a gun because you understand the power that's in your hands. But if I'm
I
not
think
mistaken, Kylan, what you also mentioned in there is that the guns were coming from, they weren't necessarily coming out of Africa, they were coming into Africa. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
correct.
So not only so are you saying that they're European made? That the
Absolutely.
Europeans invented guns?
Absolutely. So, and over like the 16th and 17th century, just due to all the activity in Europe, you know, they continue to improve on that mechanism, right? And once they got it to a point where it was efficient in a tropical climate, they took it down into Africa to use as leverage, right? To kind of spark off the slave trade, because it sort of became a currency to kind of kick all that off as well. So um, one could say the African peoples of that time, they were not subject to, well, this is debatable, right? They weren't subject to a superior intelligence. They were subject to a superior technology, right? And in that instance, just imagine that, right? If you're an indigenous individual, you never seen fire propelled from someone's hands, right? You never heard that visual. What would that do to your psychology? I'm sure that confused and petrified a lot of those people. So, and you don't know how that mechanism is working, right? You don't know if that's an unlimited.
witchcraft. You don't know if it's witch. They
Yeah,
probably thought it was witchcraft. Yeah.
yeah, you don't know what you're looking at. So that becomes a huge advantage, right? That you can kind of use to intimidate, to enforce, to do what they did, right? So that was just a piece of it that I think is worthy of considering for
Yes,
sure.
yes, absolutely. That's very important. Very important. And it gives a little bit more understanding of why things are the way they are in our communities. So not only did they invent the guns, but they helped create the minds of these shooters. You feel me? And
Mm,
when you think about that, it's like, wow, we're in deep. But again, I think that starting early with gun safety somewhat combats that. Because even once you get to an age where you have the opportunity to have a weapon in your possession, again, you understand the power behind that because you've always been taught gun safety. Because
I think
typically
you
when
have a
people
little
are
bit more
out,
respect for it.
right, you have more
mhm.
respect for that power as well.
Yeah, you have more respect.
Indeed.
I think a lot of us too, especially if us grew up in the urban areas and in the hood or whatnot, guns are always deemed as like criminal activity. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Right.
But for out, but I remember my grandma and my grandpa had some in their room just for protection because you never know when shit gets squiggly. You know what I mean? And then back in the day, they had them in case shit gets squiggly. But like we were deemed, especially if you grew up in the '90s and things of that, in the '80s and '90s and shit like that, guns were had a stigma of criminal vibes to it. You know what I'm saying? Or gang vibes to it. So it's like, oh, I don't want to touch a gun, like, 'cause, I'm scared of, you know what I mean, or I want to touch it because I want to body some shit up. You know what I'm saying? Or it was a slippery slope. So I think what Bilal like made a good point. Like let's train them early so they have that respect for it and understand that power and what it's really really used for.
responsibility because, like, yeah, we was reckless in the '90s, man. You know,
Right.
just flashing joints and all types of stuff. I got kicked out. You know what I'm saying? Like ridiculous, man. So like all that, you know, you need to teach that responsibility and that respect. You know, understand what I'm saying? Because we were just reckless. Just
Yeah.
And then you also have you can have the opportunity to use weapons to hunt, also to use a gun to hunt. So it's not only for protection, but it should be used to go out. It can, like you said, preservation. That's part of that as well, making sure that if this keeps going, that gun can be a part of it. But again, I think it all just starts with the gun safety. But peace and blessings, G.
Peace and
Peace
blessings
and
to you guys,
blessings.
man. What's going on?
Peace.
Man,
peace.
thank you
All
for
right.
joining us, man. So just a quick recap. We kind of did a historical spotlight on the Deacons for Defense and Justice. And currently we're just kind of talking about the historical context of firearms in our community versus like in a rural setting, right? And what some of those factors are in terms of how we kind of perceive firearms collectively. And we plan to dive a little deeper into that conversation. But now that you're here, I definitely want to give you a proper introduction. Gerry with the G of Click Click Bang Firearms, a local firearms dealer shop located in the Awatuki neighborhood. I highly encourage anyone who is a firearms enthusiast, or if you're just looking to get started and you don't necessarily know where to start, my guy Gerry with the G, perfect guy to get you going. So yeah, Gerry, you want to add to that? I know you guys offer a lot of other services in terms of training and things of that nature. So let's get the people informed about who you are and what Click Click Bang offers to the community.
For sure, for sure. Thank you guys for having me, for one. So a lot of people like to talk about firearms and the different aspects of where firearms leads. You know, the most things we hear on the news is used for destruction, right? Um, but first and foremost, in our community, we need to adapt to thinking of firearms is a tool. First and foremost, it's a tool like your kitchen knife, like your screwdriver, like your hammer. It's a tool, and with all tools, you need to be safe around, right? You need to be safe. You need to know how to utilize the tool correctly. So, gun safety is like the most important aspect when it comes to dealing with firearms, right? I don't think I don't think anyone should dare touch or try to even indulge in the sport, if it's a sport you're doing or for hunting, without having the basic necessities of knowing how to be safe around them. After you get the safety and the mix, everything else, sky's the limit, right? So we always go over gun safety in any aspect of what we're doing. If we're doing a training program, if we're out doing a sport, if we're just our day-to-day handling things, gun safety is the most important part of it. And I think we never got that in some of the communities. Some of the rural, the urban communities never got that, right. It was more in those the outer banks, those communities. They were actually taught gun safety and how to utilize firearms in schools. I know where I'm from. We were never given that opportunity. Only two people had firearms: cops and robbers. Right, that's it.
Yeah.
Everybody else felt in this gray area. So coming to find out that we one can own firearms, and not only one type of firearm, many different types of firearms, whether it be a bolt action, semi-auto, full auto, break open, right, revolver. It doesn't matter. We we have we have the ability to teach one another, right, about owning firearms and being safe around them, because history tends to repeat itself if you're not up on what's going on. Right? We weren't meant to have firearms. Like I see one, two, three, four, five of us here. We originally weren't meant to have firearms. And that's for a special reason, right? So one of the reasons is to protect ourselves against any enemy. right? Or foreign threat. The other is if we need necessities like food, makes things a little bit easier to gather some food products, right? Animal products. If you guys eat meat, some people don't eat meat, which is fine too. Um, and then we have it for sport, for recreational. How many of you guys on the panel shoot? Two. So some people shoot for therapeutic reasons. Like you go to the range and it's you and that target, you're focused on whatever drill or exercise you're trying to do, and everything just falls to the waistline, right? You're focused on what you're doing, what your task is at hand, whatever fundamental you're trying to pick up or tighten up on, whatever skill it is you're trying to tighten up on. It it really is just therapeutic. Some people do massages. I like to go to the range. And another aspect is it brings camaraderie uh of communities together because now we can shoot together and give different aspects and show different techniques to one another and learn together. So it builds a bond amongst us as well. I think it's very important. Huge. It's a huge, especially in today's age. It's not. They cannot take away the firearms. Let's. For every American, there's 4 firearms to every American in the United States. So the taking away of firearms is that's out of reach. So they're gonna do other things. They're gonna try and ban certain things. They're gonna criminalize certain things. They're gonna make it easy for you to criminalize yourself if you're not up on the latest laws that's going on. And I'm gonna give a prime example. The brace law. Everybody knows. Not everybody. Let me not say that, but some of us know that the dynamics of a firearm could change with one piece. One piece can make a legal firearm into an illegal firearm with just changing one piece. And if you don't know, you don't know. But if you don't know, is no excuse for the law. So they could criminalize you. Now you can't have a firearm. They could try and take firearms away. We know that's not going to happen. And they're gonna deem or make it demonic for us to have certain firearms. They're gonna demonize a firearm. Like
Are you
the
talking about the
firearm
switch?
is the say it again.
You talking about the switch?
No, not even the switch. They're just gonna AR-15. They made an
Oh,
AR-15 to
okay,
be
okay.
this menacing thing that can do so much weird things that I don't even know where they get their information from, but it's incorrect. And once we educate each other, we'll know because in my family per se, uh, guns wasn't thought about, right? I have family members that say, I'll pull out the good book if I come into trouble, before anything. And I respect that. But I think you should not at least learn the information, right? It's not going to hurt to learn the information. It's not going to hurt you. It's just going to make you much better and more knowledgeable of things. This way, you can make a righteous choice, not by what CNN or NBC or any other media sources tell you about certain firearms or firearms in general. So, yeah, I just hope that we as a community need to pay attention to a lot of the people, the powers that be, that's running in the offices and coming up in the offices and see what their agenda is. Because if they want to do certain things, a big question is why. We want to take away guns. Why? Because they can shoot 300 rounds per minute. False, right? We understand now because we know the information. So they can't just give us any nonsense and we're gonna fall for it, right? Um, and then we get to understand the real root and cause of why they may not want firearms in our hands, right? If you look at like places like Venezuela, they took all the firearms away, and a lot of Venezuelans said, mm-mm-mm. The country went to hell in a handbasket because they had no way of defending themselves against their own government. They had to do what was told. and they had no way to defend themselves, right? So we do. I see someone out there. What's up? We do want to make sure that we stay educated on firearms, and my goal. I'm not a expert. I'm not going to say I'm the best person out there that knows it all about firearms, but I'm learning every day, and I teach what I know, right? And I want to always teach facts. I don't want to give nothing that's not factual, right? I don't want to give false information out there. I want people to know the truth. So as much as I know is as much as I will share.
Indeed.
That's dope.
You brought up a really good point, considering like so culturally, right? So our demographic, inner city, black, right? Our experience from a young age versus the rural demographic, especially white, whereas it's a lifestyle thing for a lot of those individuals, right? I've had coworkers, for instance, and they've been doing this particular like outdoor activities in general, right? Fishing, hunting, camping, firearms since they can remember, right? So it becomes almost second nature to them, right? So because they have that education from a very young age, it does, the contrast between that and someone in the inner city where they've only got those limited experiences with firearms, like you said, cops and robbers, right? That creates an interesting dynamic and dichotomy with the firearm. Whereas, a lot of our young men, for instance, sports, entertainment, we all kind of, like in a neighborhood like I grew up in, and I'm sure others on this call, a lot of us knew how to play sports and we knew music, dancing, that kind of thing, right? We all did that. You know what I'm saying? Like you didn't even have to ask. It was just like, okay, if you hear, I know you can do this, right? Whereas on their side, I feel like those recreational activities that they were indulged in, they have dual, at least, or multiple purposes, right? So it's not only recreation, but it also serves as protection, a mechanism to acquire food and safety and all those things, right? Whereas dribbling a basketball can't really do nothing for you outside of that court, right? It doesn't provide anything for you essential in your life. Throwing that football doesn't really translate anywhere else. So I think that's something for those of our demographic to consider, and we really need to diversify our interests from a younger age, for sure.
Yeah, the fact that you brought up the sport option for firearms, I think that's forgotten a lot. Typically it's just either hunting or protection, but we forget that can actually be a sport. And then you mentioned it also being therapeutic. So I already had some thoughts and can somewhat understand how that may be. So thank you for sharing that. I'm gonna look more into that myself.
No doubt, no doubt. It's definitely more to it than just firearms for killing each other. No, that's what they
Right.
want you to think. That's the agenda. Firearms are just for killing each other. It's bad, but it can be a good thing. It's been a lot of instances where firearms helped people out in situations that it was necessary. It's either you or them, right? And you'd rather be on the winning end of that stick, right? And I hear this a lot. There's so many different enhancements to firearms now, and they're saying a lot of people say, well, that's cheating. I was like, well, in self-defense, I want to cheat. Right? I want to cheat. I want the upper hand. So
Right.
yeah, that they're really making these firearms a lot more enhanced, where it's easier for target acquisition. I mean, it's a lot. It's so much to it. I mean, like I said, I haven't been in firearms long for all you guys out there. It's been about 7 years where I've really been into firearms, but I took a rabbit hole and I went head first. And I really went into it where I trained with professionals, I trained with my peers. I learned as much as I could learn. I learned to fix firearms. So one of those jack of alls, master of nones. But it's a constant struggle of trying to get people to understand that firearms do not have to be something that is a bad thing or taboo. It can really be a good thing. Depends on the end, the person. It depends on the user. The user is the one that's going to dictate whether it's going to be positive or negative.
Right.
And not to take anything away from the sports, because sports do play a lot. Is entertainment for one, and it gives good cardio.
Absolutely.
It's good for the health. Being in shape and things like that. So I mean,
Yeah,
everything
teamwork,
has its place.
leadership, all of that. You get all of that
Exactly.
still.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to demonize any of those aspects. But I think I want to just emphasize the diversification, right?
Yes, sir.
Mix some other things into that for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it should be. I think gun safety, amongst anything, gun safety should be taught in schools again. Just like how many of you guys went to school and you have fire drills?
Right.
Everybody on this panel, right? How many of you guys ever had a fire in your school that you had to utilize the stop, drop, and roll technique? Probably nobody, right? But did it hurt to learn it?
Right.
No, not at all. It's better to know it and not need it, right? So I think they need to stop making it such a bad thing and more educate people on firearms, and people will realize it's really not bad. It's the person behind the firearm. It's not the tool itself.
Indeed. Brother Nakia, I see you joined us. Glad to have you. Anything you want to add to the conversation? I want to make sure you get your piece.
Man, first off, thank you guys for this conversation because I believe it's a much needed conversation. I just like you, Kylan. I started early with teaching my children. We're from the country, right? So Arkansas is some of those backwoods. My sister and them, they've got 26 acres and a pond on the back of their land, so it was easy. Anytime I went down to their house, I took a good amount of ammunition with me, and that's what we did. Even if I had my little 22 rifle. And my kids are, just showing them how to use it, how to break it down once we finish, how to take it apart, just the muzzle control, just things like that, just teaching them the basics of what it means. And I think the key is in education because they know without a doubt. And just like I knew with my grandfather, I knew he had firearms, but guess what? I knew not to touch them. I knew they were not to be played with. They were only there for the necessary needs. And so, I think that's the real key is education, brother. So I appreciate being a part of the conversation.
What do you think the significance of firearms with land ownership is? Do they go hand in hand, or?
I was 15.
Oh, that's a
Man,
question for
so
anybody. Yeah.
it's a sense of security, right? So you operate a little bit different when you know that there's the potential weapons being involved, right? And so I think it's a sense of responsibility that comes along with it, and I think that's where we are right now. Is that just understanding that sense of responsibility.
What about you, Gerry?
So land ownership and firearms. Now, there's two things to that. There is maybe you have, like, brother, what's your name down here? I can't see. Nakia.
Brother
Said he was on 26
Yes,
acres. That's awesome, man. So that's something until now was unheard of for me. But I'm sure if those that may have land like that may have, cattle or some sort, that they're growing or raising food, and you always have predators that want to take away from
my
that food
brother-in-law
source.
loves deer hunting.
Right. So you may want to protect your livestock, right? So that's where firearms may come in important in land ownership. Other than that, most of the times you're in a rural area if you have a lot of land. Your neighbor might be quarter a mile or half a mile away from you, and if something were to happen, you need to protect your environment or your situation at hand, or your land or your property, or the people on your property, right? So I think it's very important. It shouldn't even if you don't have land. I think every citizen in the United States, right, where or anywhere, but here, that's because I'm here, should be able to protect land and home, right? You should feel safe when you go home. Unfortunately, that's not the case in today's society. When you're at home, you're actually your most vulnerable because you're most likely to let your guard all the way down. And that what makes you vulnerable. So you should be able to protect that. So when it comes to land or home, I think everyone should at least, exercise their right to protect land and home.
You definitely gonna be vulnerable when somebody kicking your door and you try to break out the good book or try to talk them to death for over some cookies and milk or something. But,
Right.
G, I wanted to
Right.
ask you something, man. Like, so what do you think about the gun buyback incentives that are happening in a lot of like black communities? What's behind all that and what they're being
Uh,
offered?
so the gun buyback, person, this isn't so this is in fact, this is my opinion. It's a way to it's a way for people to give away their guns. Hey, let me get their guns. I just offer some money for it. And a person might say, well, I don't need this. Why do I need this? I haven't had a problem yet. I'll just get rid of it. Or you got those, especially the buyback programs where they ask no questions. Those programs make it easy for criminals to try and steal guns and go get money for the guns because they're not going to ask any questions, right? So it's them trying to prove that, hey, look, I'm doing something to try and get firearms off the street. I could tell you again, 4-1. And that's 4 to everyone. Those that, even if you don't own one, that's how many are out there. 4-1. Right. So if there's
Wow.
300 million,
330 million, I think, is where we at.
330 million, right?
So well over a billion.
Exactly. Yes. That'd be a lot of buying back. At whose expense?
Yeah.
And a lot of times you're not even getting you're not even getting the value of your firearm. It's like eminent
Absolutely.
domain. They give you market value or lower. So you might have an
Absolutely.
antique that's worth $3,000 and they're talking about I give you $30 for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that
Wow.
happened
yeah.
to a brother of mine recently, man. We went and he looked up the price of the gun online, right? He never shot it. We walked in and the same place that he bought it from never shot it. They offered him $400 when he played well over 12.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a trick, it's a gimmick, it's a way to say, hey, look over here while they hitting you with the other hand. It's just tricks.
Indeed. I was going to ask you, for someone that does not own firearms or doesn't have experience with them, where to start. I think you partially answered that. I think the first place to start is safety, right? So getting with somebody that's proficient to give you a proper introduction, and then just kind of doing what works for you from there. Budget wise, comfort wise, whatever your living arrangement or commuting situation, you got to consider all of that. So I think that was the proper answer to that question. First, just understanding the safety and the responsibilities, right? So that piece that you mentioned about ignorance of the law is no excuse, man. Sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes because it applies in so many different aspects of our lives. But that's the reality of the situation. So I think we definitely need to encourage ourselves to get more acclimated with the law in general, right? Removing the emotional perspective, right, and just being objective and actually just being informed. So that's something that I'd also want to emphasize before we wrap this thing up.
Yeah. I would
Great.
say if you haven't dealt with firearms or learned something from someone, maybe your grandfather, grandmother, anyone in your family, go to someone that was certified and to train in gun safety. And I say that because I see a lot of people that come into the gun store and they say, "Oh yeah, well, my my boyfriend told me he was in the military." Right? Which is cool. I appreciate those in the military. But just because you're in the military doesn't mean you learned you learned any training at all. You might have been someone that's just putting on, you know, the heads on a missile. You never shot a gun in your life, right? So you really don't understand the safety. And again, this is not a shot at anyone in the military because I appreciate what those guys do, but someone that really was trained to teach firearm safety or training for firearm disciplines anyway, right? I would definitely recommend that they do seek out that professional help and just learn it. It's nothing. I mean, they get AZ Game and Fish has a class. You know, we have a class. There's a lot of people that teach gun safety, and you'll recognize when someone learns. Like because I hear it a lot. Man, I learned that, but you actually taught me why. Instead of don't do that, don't point the gun over there. Why? Right? Because you need to know the why behind it, not just do as I say, you know what I mean? Not as I do. I'm going to tell you why. Why is it better for you to go with someone that's educated in firearm safety? Because they've trained with people that's what they trained with all the way growing up, right? Since they started, they learned the right way. That's why I think, even though I told you guys I was only in it for 7 years, I didn't. Well, let me stop. I did go to University of YouTube on a couple of things, but I went and trained with like NRA, with NAGA, USCCA. I trained with those individuals because their thing is to train in those disciplines only,
Right.
right? So I learned from those as well as maybe some Navy SEALs and others. So I learned from different aspects. I don't go with one because I do think there's more than one way to do things. There's not just one right way. There's going to be other ways. It's like math, right? You can do an equation and you can do it one way. I could do it the same way. Once the answer is the same, hey, it's perfect. You know, I'm
Indeed.
cool with it.
Indeed. Anybody else have any closing thoughts, comments, or questions?
Where can the people reach you at, G, and get more information on the classes and just purchasing them and just more insight?
Yeah, so you can reach me at www.clickclickbang.com, and that's CLIK, not CLICK. You know, unfortunately, a hairstylist thought they needed CLICK more than I did. But it's CLIKBANG.com. That's the website. Some of the classes are on there, not all of them. And you can find me on Instagram, CLIKBANG, the number one, click bang one. And on
Where
my
you located
Instagram,
again?
huh?
Where you located again?
In Awatuki, Phoenix, Arizona. And so and where we train at, we do outdoor training. I think that's very important that people know the difference between indoor training and outdoor training. So we teach, man, we go from the floor up. If you want to jump out of helicopters, I might not teach you jumping out of helicopters, but we got somebody on the team that'll show you how to jump out of helicopters and shoot your firearm if that's what you want to do, right? But you gotta prove that you got the safety fundamentals down, or it's not gonna happen.
Right.
Nah, he's not exaggerating. I went out to Cowtown with y'all on one particular occasion, and we were shooting not super long range, but man, y'all had them things out there, man. So I had a good time because I thought, I got a little stash here of a couple of things, and I brought those out. But I mean, some of them guys had them things, so that was a lot of fun for me to see, and that, proficient in their craft. So that was great to come up under and have that experience. So yeah, the camaraderie piece is important as well, because not only can they serve as accountability partners, but it just kind of reinvigorates your desire to stay involved, stay enthusiastic, and learn. So that's great, man. Click bang. I appreciate you for being with us, brother, dropping the jewels, dropping the
Yes, sir.
information.
Yes, sir.
I definitely look forward to coming through. Click bang. It's been a minute.
Oh,
But
it's no,
I'll be there soon.
it's all good. It's all good, man. I appreciate you guys having me on. I didn't know what to expect, but I'm glad that you guys had me on, so we could all learn from one another, and
Yeah.
help one another grow, because I think it's important in this community.
Indeed.
The growth
Indeed.
spot.
All right.
Indeed. So I'm gonna have to link you in with what we got going on. This particular collective and a couple of other brothers. We actually own a significant amount of land, and we got a lot of projects going on and coming in the future. So I'm
Salute.
sure that there's going to be some opportunity for us all to collaborate, considering the space that we have. We have 37 and a half acres
Man,
collectively in
man,
in a
that's
rural
when
area.
that's
So
awesome, man. When I tell you that's awesome, I mean, cause they could build more houses, but they can't build more land, man. So that's
Man,
awesome to hear that, man. I love that. I love that for real,
indeed, indeed. So we're
thank
gonna
you,
stay
thank you.
tapped in. So for
for
anyone
sure.
that's listening, Gerry with the G, he told you where to find him. Hit us up too. Look at the ticker for all our contact, the Growth Spot Squad on IG, we're on Facebook, website down there. If you got any questions, shoot it to our email and we'll be sure to address that. Until next time, we'll be right back at you. We're going to keep these rolling consistently. Um, Anything that is remotely involved with land ownership, self-sustainability, survivalism, all of that. We're going to be tackling all of that. So if you got ideas um, on particular topics that we should discuss, please make yourself be seen so we can address it.
Yes, sir. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.